Hello everyone, welcome back to my MG channel. This is a video on my diagnosis and the circumstances that got me diagnosed. And yeah, this is a very quick video just to explain that. Don't think a disclaimer is needed on this because I'm not going to tell you anything other than my personal experience. So as always, just a reminder, I'm not a doctor, a medical person, only trained or consultant, anything like that. I'm just me, and I know absolutely nothing about what I'm talking about medically, so bear that in mind. But in terms of my symptoms, they really started, I think it was on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, where I started work in the morning and I just couldn't look at my laptop. It seemed too bright, my eyes were a bit glary, I didn't know what was going on. And I thought maybe I'd turn the screen down, change the contrast, those kind of things. And that wasn't doing it. So I went out to walk the dog and I went outside and I was like, wow, this is bright. So I put a pair of sunglasses on and just did the dog walk and thought nothing of it, came back, had a couple more days on the laptop where it's quite actually painful. And I was really starting to squint with one eye. It was becoming quite frustrating, annoying. I didn't know why. So I booked in the opticians, thought I might need an eye test, a pair of glasses because I do computer work. And in the end, what happened was the optician looked at it and said, actually, I'm really quite concerned. And she referred me to A&E. And she said, your eye basically is tracking out. This is my left eye, which I think to you looks like my right eye, but it was tracking out. It was looking outwards, which she was concerned about. So went to the A&E people. I saw a doctor who, to be frank with you, was a complete idiot. He told me about his friend with a lazy eye. He said that it was nothing to worry about. And his actual medical advice to me was go home and don't ever think about it again. That was literally his medical advice to me. And this is a guy who's apparently a consultant of some kind. But nevertheless, because I did go into A&E, I was triggered automatically to referral to the eye clinic. And a few days later, I went in to see the eye clinic, and the lady there, she's very, very good. She's very worried and concerned that this has suddenly happened. And one of the things she did mention was MG, although she said obviously subject to tests. Had numerous eye tests at the eye clinic, had all kinds of visual field things, all kinds of other things, and they realised that my eye was tracking out and it was a problem. And as I said, because I was squinting and because of various other things, I was finding it quite difficult to do anything. So in the end, they gave me basically an eye patch to wear, which I wore for doing various things. The eye lady, having done all her tests over a couple of weeks, couldn't find an actual problem with my eyes, so she referred me to neurology. But at the same time, I had an MRI scan, I had CT scans, and I also had blood tests. And because they came back clear, as in they didn't come back with any cancer or anything like that, I was then bumped onto this 6-month wait for neurology, which was quite crazy, given the fact that the eye lady had put it on urgent, which should have been 2 weeks. But nevertheless, that happened. Then my eyesight really started to deteriorate. I certainly wasn't in a position to drive. Walking became difficult, loss of balance. I was kind of all over the place for a while. Lots of problems like that, predominantly down to the eye. And then soon after, my neck started to not, it didn't work right, it wasn't upright, it couldn't really support itself. And then I had problems with my arms as well. Dressing myself in the morning was very, very difficult. Putting t-shirts on, drying yourself with a towel after a shower, those kind of things. So those all became problems. And I wrote to my GP, who is frankly useless, and a very urgent letter. And I said, look, these are the problems I've got. I've read about MG. I haven't been diagnosed with it because I'm still waiting for the test to come back, but I've read about MG and I need to urgently see a neurologist. I need you to sort it out, basically. And I tried to call them for an appointment, and as usual, that was refused because GPs are useless. I wrote to them. The letter had urgent and impressed the urgency about 8 times in it. And their response to that was to write to me a week later and say, why don't you phone to book an appointment? And it's like, well, that's exactly what I asked you to do the week before on an urgent basis. But nevertheless, GPs are useless, we kind of know that. So what then happened was I went on a work trip, and it was quite, the hours were quite long because some of the flights got delayed because of weather and things like that. And I went on a work trip, and on my work trip I realised my eyesight was getting absolutely terrible. And I started to then develop some slurred speech, which everyone thought I was drunk, and I had about 3 Coke Zeros and not touched beer. So, well, they didn't think I was drunk because I explained to them that I was having some problems, but that wasn't good. And then really this work trip was a couple of days, and I noticed the side of my face kind of sag, almost like I'd had a stroke again. Slurred speech, lots of other problems, my arms getting worse. It got to a point where, because I was on a plane picking up a bag and putting it in the overhead locker, couldn't do, I had to get the cabin crew to do it. Because I had slurred speech, they thought I'd been pissing up in the lounge, which I hadn't done. Well, I might have had a couple of beers, but that's another story. But I was sober, I had a problem basically, and it looked like I'd had a stroke. So I came back a couple of days in the evening on the Tuesday with these symptoms. My partner, Mrs. Neal, she wasn't very happy that this has happened. So the next morning I went to A&E, and I was inpatiented. Firstly, they thought I'd had a stroke, and they're very, very worried about that. And it turned out, having done the test, that I didn't have a stroke. And in the end, what happened is I stayed there for 3 days, and I took a drug on the second day called pyristigmine, which is there to. I should let me just step back a bit. I saw a neurologist finally. So even though I was on a 6-month waiting list, the neurologist came to see me basically the next day and was very concerned and prescribed me this thing called pyristigmine. And pyristigmine I had, and within about 2 hours, there are a lot of things that worked very, very well. So my face fixed itself. I didn't look like I had a stroke anymore. My slurred speech had gone. My arms appeared to work properly. Everything was coming back. The eyes took a bit longer, but essentially the neurologist basically said that because pyristigmine is the only thing that fixes MG, that was a very, very good indicator of the way that I turned out was working. And then there were a couple of other bits and pieces that I had tested for, one of which was a CT scan to see if there was a thymoma on my lymph node. I'll come back to you on another video about that, but essentially that was a telltale sign. So these are all symptoms that I had. These are the personal symptoms I had. So the arms was a big thing, as I could barely dress or dry myself after a shower. The eyes, another thing which was just ongoing. The slurred speech and the facial drops, or like a stroke, was only something that lasted a couple of days. And was quickly fixed with the pyristigmine, and my arms came back quite quickly as well. But I did for a while have some problems with my legs, some weakness in my legs, obviously weakness in my neck, and I don't think I necessarily had, some people say you have drooping eyes. I didn't have drooping eyes, but it's something you can get with MG as well. But those are my symptoms, and I think it's fair to say, touch wood, wherever some wood is, that I didn't have some of the other much more serious problems that people have. And some of those problems are to do with swallowing, where people can't swallow, and some of them are to do with breathing. And obviously both of those are affected by the muscles. And if you've seen my other video on what causes MG, then you'll understand that the muscles are something to do with this ACHR chemical that's in you, and so on and so forth. So as much as it was annoying to have bad arms and a face that looked like it wasn't working, and with slurred speech like I was drunk, and eyes problems, I think I'm probably quite lucky that I didn't have those other issues with my lungs and so on and so forth that other people do. So I'm grateful for that. But those in a nutshell are my symptoms. As I said, there are other symptoms that people have, but those are my symptoms, and ultimately that's what got me my diagnosis. But unfortunately, because of the 6-month neurology wait, and because my GP is absolutely useless, it took for me to look like I've had a stroke, and for people to be very concerned about me before I could actually get an appointment to see anybody, or I had to get the appointment through being admitted into A&E, which I think when one looks at the whole kind of bigger picture, it's probably less than ideal to be in a situation where you're putting all that pressure on A&E and emergencies, where people are coming in with things a lot more life-threatening than I was, just to get treatment, because neurology have got quite a long waiting list and GPs can't do their jobs properly. So that's, of course, maybe slightly political of me, but that's my view on it. But to be fair, and I should say this as a final point, the neurologist I did see, he's quite a young chap and he's absolutely excellent. So even though there are a few steps to get to see him, I now have a fantastic neurologist. He's very, very good, very, very knowledgeable. He's actually very young, but he's very, very, very good. And I now have an ability to contact him through his secretary anytime I need to. But it was unfortunate I had to wait that long. But there you go. That's my symptoms. I've explained some of the other symptoms, and I think probably my next video is going to talk about treatment. Thank you very much.